Welcome to the Gravity Well podcast with me, Jenny Yeremy. I host the Gravity Well to celebrate and share the stories of people looking to empower others with the knowledge and skills required to reestablish stability in our communities. My mission is to work through heavy issues in conversation and process in order to lighten the load. I acknowledge that I live on the traditional territories of Treaty 7 and Métis Districts 5 and 6. The treaties and self-governance agreements established by Indigenous peoples were created to honor the laws of the land, maintain balance with nature, and give back to uphold reciprocal relationships. This knowledge and intention are what guide the Gravity Well conversations. I ask for genuine dialogue, real hearts, and openness to different perspectives. This is your invitation to find common ground with me. Positions taken by participants, either individually or collectively, do not necessarily represent those of the Gravity Well. This podcast is dedicated to the natural world, our children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and all future generations. The Gravity Well is on YouTube and streaming wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you see and hear, remember to like and subscribe. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm back in the studio this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Peter MacKay. MacKay. I'm sure that's not correct. Okay. And I was in the studio earlier today with Andy Sitsima at noon. We are back today to talk about the ongoing crisis in public education. And Peter MacKay is an advocate and an excellent speaker on behalf of teachers that he will be speaking for today. But first, I just want to take a moment to say that myself and the Reclaim public education community that I've come to know over the last 3 or 4 months are very saddened by the school shooting at Tumbler Ridge in BC. Our hearts go out to the Tumbler Ridge community. We expect and hope that the Canadian government will look to Australia on the backs of the Bondi Beach tragedy to strengthen gun policy in Canada. And we hope that the community comes together and stays strong throughout this. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. I had another stellar conversation with Charlie this week. I encourage you to check it out. It's called Reclaim Alberta, People Have the Power. Charlie and I expressed our concerns over the foreign interference that we're seeing, particularly from the United States, attempting to create a fake constitutional crisis in Alberta through a separatist movement. Charlie reminds us that our grassroots efforts, such as recall petitions and public school advocacy, for example, are the difference. They're the crucial tools that will help us get through these challenging times together. So I'm really excited to be speaking with somebody today about bridging two groups together that are working hard in that space. We also had a Midas Canada Town Hall in Calgary that is available to see as well. Please check that out. I just want to mention that on the waterfront, I've been talking about the waterfront activities that have been happening. I had a great conversation this week with several groups around citizens' assemblies and water. Again, we're looking to do a public education assembly out of Bow, out of this work that we did on the recall. Super excited about some upcoming interviews that I'm going to do with Bob Sanford, who's an author of the World Bankruptcy Report that just came out, co-author, and Colin Smith, who has been working on some watershed assemblies, as I've been talking about as well. We are working towards the Public Interest Alberta event. It's called Common Purpose Collective Action. It's a conference that will happen in Edmonton, where we are planning to present a water-centered participatory democracy framework. So looking forward to sharing that with some people and getting some ideas on it. The next thing in Calgary, just to mark your calendar on the waterfront, is the Trouble in the Headwaters screening that will be done by Save Our Slopes. It's featuring Dr. Eunice Alila. I interviewed him on the show with Bob Morrison last year on the impacts of resource extraction. He is a forestry expert and also a cumulative impacts expert in terms of measuring harms and reducing and assigning where those harms were generated from. It's pretty remarkable science that he's crafted over the last 20 years. On the recalls, again, I encourage you to go to Operation Total Recall. I was rewatching a video of Peter MacKay speaking with Markham Hislop today, and reminding that this is a great way for teachers to express your frustrations through public action. So this Saturday, I'm headed out to Calgary East. If you want to join us to do some door knocking and help educate folks in that area, you are most welcome. You can reach out to me at jenny@thegravitywell.net to get involved in that. Okay, so that's enough from me. I would like to bring Peter on stage. Sorry, I butchered your name there, Peter.
Oh, you're not the first, and
Yeah.
I butcher my name regularly. Actually, it should be Peter MacKay. If I went to Scotland not long ago, and I made, because out in the West, a lot of us pronounce it MacKay. So, but MacKay properly.
So that's interesting because I'm fairly certain I mispronounce my last name. Not my last name, but my adopted, like my husband's last name is Yaramy, I think, but I say Jeremy. I don't know why. It's just, so I think it's a thing here that we don't necessarily pronounce our origins properly. Anyway, I just want to give a little bit of background of you for my audience, Peter. So Peter is a Grand Prairie middle school teacher and a longtime active member of the Alberta Teachers Association. He chaired the Central Table Bargaining Committee, which led the ATA negotiations with the Alberta government until September of last year. So Peter is now speaking, as he said, for himself, but I would love to catch up with you on the things that you saw during the bargaining process leading up to the teacher strike. For my audience, I think if we back up and frame, what is the crisis in public education? But first, please start with a little better introduction of yourself, Peter, and what brought you into this work. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I have been a teacher since, I think, 1997. It could be 1996. I honestly can't remember at this point. It's been a while. The early part of my career, I was always active in the ATA in my local, but a lot of my focus early on was actually coaching basketball. But at a certain point, you go through seasons in your life, and I became more ATA active, I suppose. Became president of my local and wore several hats there, and then eventually became a member of the provincial executive council of the ATA. And then at a certain, pretty early, actually, right away, I was on the Central Table Bargaining Committee. And then eventually, like towards the end, I was VP, ran for president, but it wasn't successful. But back in the classroom now and just trying to keep pushing things. I have a pretty active social media feed on Facebook and on Instagram, Peter MacKay Teacher, and I post a lot of stuff there, depending on the day. Not every day, but most days I think I would do it.
Yeah, I've been so grateful to follow you now through the teachers community that I now have. And it's remarkable stuff that you do, Peter. I feel like it's a voice in the darkness for us to look to and understand what's happening and that we're not crazy, and, just keeping us all on track as to what happened and where we need to head. So let's get into it. So if you wouldn't mind, let's just start with, can you outline what does the Alberta public schools crisis look like today for people in it?
Well, I mean, the root of the crisis is underfunding, like systematic underfunding. Now, I think everybody is aware, I guess I'll back up a little bit. There was a time, if you go back into the mid 2000s, and this goes back to my time as a coach. I remember I had a conversation with someone who was kind of my doppelganger from British Columbia. I was in a tournament in Dawson Creek, British Columbia. And this person had the same number of years of experience as me, same education as I had, and I was making about $22,000 more. I had, like we were talking about the nature of resourcing. I had special needs kids. I had EA support, a smart board. I can't remember if it had just arrived or was on the way, like things of this nature. Like Alberta has, we used to always talk about the Alberta advantage.
Right.
And I think, if a person wanted to put it in the shortest possible way, people sort of believe in the ghost of the Alberta advantage, but not realizing that the Alberta advantage died some years ago, in terms of the advantages that are being provided to our citizens. I think those advantages continue to flow for a lot of corporate actors, in particular in oil and gas, but the level of support for healthcare, the level of support for education, just is not what we used to see. And this all accelerated, I'll say bluntly, when we elected, when the UCP got elected. And the, this is, and of course, I was born and raised, my father was born and raised here in Alberta. I've been under conservatives almost my entire life, with the exception of 4 years. And this is a different type of conservative that we're dealing with, in particular, even more so since Danielle Smith became premier. But what they have done is they have just strangled, from a financial perspective, the support for public and for separate schools. I happen to teach in the separate school system. And the effect that that's had, unfortunately, if you're going to, again, for the average Albertan, I think folks send their send their kids to school, and their kids come back safe. And I mean, we've all been kids. You would remember what it would be like if your parents asked you how school went. Unless it was catastrophic, you're like, fine, right? Like, that's how kids are.
Right.
They don't have any kind of basis of comparison, but we certainly do. Especially, teachers, young teachers certainly see it. Teachers who've been there for a while, looking back to the way it was. You have, obviously, you're in Calgary. My daughter happens to teach in Calgary as well. And the class sizes, especially in large urbans like Calgary, like Edmonton, but some other places as well, you see these large classes in places like Red Deer and in certain parts of Grand Prairie where I am and elsewhere. But you also have special needs students, in what they refer to as inclusion. Okay. When I actually am a supporter of inclusion, but not inclusion without some kind of resourcing.
Right.
And because if you don't resource it, if you don't have people, like the necessary resources to make inclusion work, you are just abandoning these students. And we have far more complex classrooms. We have a far greater immigrant population than we've had. And it is currently. I had a very interesting session one time a couple of years ago, where someone from one of those immigrant support organizations, we're already in terms of percentage of the population at the highest level ever for either of Canadians who are either immigrants or children of immigrants, and we are climbing every single year. A lot of those folks require real help in order to learn English, but there has been almost no additional resourcing. So what has happened is they've just strangled it financially, and people are trying to make ends meet. Basically, what's happening in education is what's happening in healthcare. The difference is, in healthcare, unfortunately, tragically, you have people dying, like that terrible case of the 44-year-old man who died in an ER without being helped.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In our schools, also tragically, you have people whose futures simply, they are not, the full potential of our children is simply not being met.
Realized. Yeah.
Yeah, being realized.
Yeah, I had a couple of stories. One of the women working closely with me, Tanya, was saying there's like the PUF funding, how important that timing is. And taking that away when it's so critical means a lifetime setback in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So this government, and again, this is the kind of thing, like, how would a parent, an average Albertan, know, right? So when that PUF funding, that early intervention, if you just think about it, right? Like, if you get an early intervention, well, if that intervention is effective and it happens early, and that intervention increases or has a positive effect on that student's potential, well, that means in several years, you see a real difference. But if it doesn't occur, well, then you don't see that kind of learning and growth.
That's right.
Those students who were, I would say, the victims of that really irresponsible decision by the government to cut PUF funding, and what's PUF is referred to as program unit funding. It is money that is really tagged to a child to provide additional supports for especially those early years. They really gutted that program. I'm starting to get those students now, and I teach grade 7 and 8. And I can tell you, one of the conversations, if you get a group of teachers talking, everybody can see what happened there. That you have students, like I have, I've talked to my colleagues in junior high, And when I look back, a lot of teachers use Google Classroom, so there's there's plenty of opportunities for technology. But you can look
I'm
back.
learning Google Classroom through them now. Yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
keep going.
So no problem. And I can look back and see what my students used to produce for similar, like you use some of the same assignments over the years, but I look back 6 years, 7 years, there's a significant difference in terms of the writing ability. I'm primarily by training an English humanities teacher, so it has really hurt kids and is been really detrimental to their ability to reach their full potential.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, okay, so the crisis looks like underfunding, under-resourcing. It is including but not supporting what you were saying. There's the early intervention efforts have been taken away. So and it's now mounting in all of those ways. My son is in grade 11 in at Bonus High in grade 11. And he has 45 students in some of his classes. Like he said, it's like sardines. That there's some people that walk through the aisle, like the hallways like this to get through so that they can get to their classes. It's so, and I've witnessed it too as a parent, but I feel it in that way too, that it's a mounting problem, that it's not something that I fully was aware of until the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, I knew it, I always knew it, but it wasn't reaching this point where it's really at a breaking point. So I want to just frame people. Why didn't the public get this? So I just want to help people understand. You mentioned I rewatched an interview from you. I encourage people to watch it with Markham Hislop back. It was 3 months ago now, talking about the teacher strike and what happened. And in it, you were saying the Alberta government cheated. So let's just remind folks that number one, and I'm going to say how I think it was cheating, let's say, but you can correct me where I'm wrong. So it started with, there was supposed to be a report that was supposed to come out in September that would have informed the negotiations for the strike. I mean, the timing, I don't know if that was intentional, but the timing was there. There was supposed to be a report on, what was it again? It was on like violence in the classroom or something like that.
Oh, it was, well, the question of whether it was kind of formed, like the report was kind of parallel to it. Yeah, it was.
It just happened to be, but it would have helped the public understand the situation. In my view, it was due. And so it would have helped us know this is the situation. There should be classroom caps. There aren't. There should be more support. There isn't. More resources, more tools, etc. All of the ways that should have been helping the negotiations have more understanding. And like you said, there was public support. The public was with you anyway. But then what was supposed to happen is there was supposed to be an arbitration. There was going to be negotiations. And instead of having those negotiations, the Alberta government then just said, no, we're not doing that. That's when they used the notwithstanding clause. But not only did they do that, and I know this from public conversations with Markham as well, is that they also wrote in that other unions couldn't fight on your behalf. So I think there was an understanding that some other unions would have laid the groundwork for teachers and there would have been this movement towards general strike. But rather they wrote in some ways for them not to be able to do that on your behalf. And what I've heard from teachers in the discussions I've had is nobody knew what to do then. It was kind of like everybody was like, I guess we just go back to work. But now there's a feeling that the teachers should have taken that first day of action. They should have refused to work at least one day so that there would have been, this premise of a general strike and an ability to say no to these non-negotiations, let's say. So that's where it's sitting. But I would say the other thing is they were supposed to be another report that was due at the end of January. You weren't sure if it's out yet. It's not, right? There's nothing out yet.
I have not seen if it has been released. It's been very, very recently. So I took a very quick look and I didn't see anything. So
right.
But it was meant to be actually the numbers in terms of class size data were meant to be released for the end of January. Right. And they blew through their own deadline on that. And then you may or may not, like the premier does her, whatever that thing is, your premier, your province. And she said, I'm not quite sure what this maybe is a phrase that I'm not familiar with. She and Minister Nicolaides were going to have a podium sometime this week. So they would be releasing information related to the class size, class complexity work that's being done.
A podium. So not an engagement, but just basically a public statement. Like, we're going to say some stuff at a podium on a day this week. Okay.
That seems on brand. Yeah. So, like in terms of this, like, I guess what I would say, to your framing and in terms of how this pertains to the negotiations, I would argue, and I'm going to, back up just briefly a little. We've had tough negotiations before, right? We've had tough negotiations, tough times. There was a 5% rollback under Ralph Klein years ago, when remember when it was all about austerity and trying to, pay down debt, etc. But fundamentally, conservatives still had an authentic investment in public health care and public education. The difference is you're dealing with a group of people who it's clear at this point want to tear down public health care and public education. They want to
anything in the public interest. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's also include the environment in that.
100%. Yeah. No one. And I would say social services as well. Right. But what they're trying to do is make it such like there's a pretty noxious character out of the United States, a fellow named Grover Norquist, who made this. The phrase he used was, they want to basically starve the beast, which is basically programs for the public, like social programs, public education, public health. So it's weak enough that you can drag it to a bathtub and drown it. And that's what they're in the process of doing.
Actively. Yeah. It's great to acknowledge this. Like, this has to be known. This is deliberate. It's intentional, and it's unapologetic. Keep going.
and it's unapologetic. However, it's also insincere. They do lip service. They're just like, oh, we're very concerned about what's happening in schools. Well, they had an opportunity to make real, progress in terms of improving things in schools, in terms of bargaining, but they had no interest. In our bargaining, we asked at one point, we were talking about trying to get good data in the collective agreement, and it was like what they responded with was laughable. Okay. So sorry. I'm very interested to see what they come up with, because this is a government that we know has we know that they've stopped collecting data on the folks who perish while waiting for testing in healthcare or for surgery in healthcare. They will cook the data to hide what they're doing, but they know what they're doing. And so that was the framework. We're trying to negotiate, and the framework that we deal with now is a central table where there are some representatives of school boards, but this government, when they came in, changed the legislation. That's what they refer to as the PECBA legislation, that creates this central table that does negotiating for the entire province. They changed that legislation so the government has the majority. The government can do what they want to do. And these are people who had zero interest in collecting authentic data, in authentically addressing, in my opinion, and certainly not in any enforceable way, class size, class composition. And, and anyone paying attention to their bargaining in terms of salary, teacher salaries at one time were very favorable. We are now, basically teachers have fallen to the lowest in Western Canada. And they said to every public sector bargaining table in the province, 12% over 4 years. And they said, well, that's what the market says. Well, it's like, so you're saying that the market is dictating market factors. When you do the analysis, it just happens to fall to 12% over 4 years for nurses and for healthcare support staff and for teachers and for absolutely, like, you didn't just come up with a number and then retcon a reason for it, which is clearly what they did. So 100%. We weren't dealing with people who really wanted to bargain. They wanted to stuff a preset set of conditions down teachers' throats. then what happened in terms of the bargaining, I think they were very surprised. Like honestly, I mean, let's face it, we're Alberta. We're not talking about a place. This is not like Paris, you know, how you see those films of Paris where they go on strike and the whole city comes to a
Yeah.
stop,
Yeah.
right? We're not like that. There's not a tremendous history. There was one large strike in the history of the province. It wasn't province wide, but it was across a significant part of the province back in 2002. I think they were very surprised when teachers did this. We weren't sure how they were going to react. There were folks who thought that they might order us back to work right away. I thought that was a possibility. It became obvious pretty early on that they thought they had the upper hand and they were going to kind of let us stay out and starve teachers out financially. And what came as, I think, a real shock to them was the amount of support that teachers were able to maintain over the course of that strike. The polls showed it.
Right.
And eventually, this is entirely my opinion. Again, I'm here just as a teacher. There were a lot of rumors, people may or may not remember, there was a lot of chatter about the possibility of a fall election.
Right.
At that time. I'm of the opinion at this point that their intention was to call an election. And I do think that that strike hurt them enough that they were hesitant about it. And I think they wanted to call that election very badly because I think we were all seeing that there's a large deficit coming in. They're talking about a tough budget. It took an opportunity away from them because they were still riding quite high in the polls. And so, I mean, it's not as if teachers went on strike to try and prevent that. We were going on strike for bargaining reasons to try and improve conditions in our classroom, to improve compensation, to improve all those aspects. But say what you will, and I guess we'll never know that for a fact, but it does help me sleep at night that perhaps we prevented another locked in 4 years with a stronger majority of this particular government. Because, yeah.
I think, wow, thank you, Peter. I think that's really helpful because especially, like I said, I've met so many great teachers and I still am hanging around a lot of teachers with the recall movement. Mm-hmm. And I say to them, thank you for striking. And they go, like, what was the point? Yeah. And I think it's really, so the next thing I say, please know, if you haven't heard me say this already, is you guys woke up the province. Thank you. So when I say that now, we can tie that with, I remember that now that you say that, there was talk. They thought they were just going to roll that into an election and everything was going to be great. And you're right. We are headed towards a very different energy future in a very quick way. Alberta is going to feel this as we experienced in 2014, experience the drop in oil prices first, because we have that product that is the worst quality on the planet. That's just the way it is. So, and, you know, these are the folks that are in charge are leading us in the wrong way. Instead of stopping that, they're increasing that. Instead of telling our kids that we need to stop that, they're also telling our kids that we need that. And the biggest sort of slap in the face from somebody like me, who is very aware, and the reason why I got involved in this is from that perspective, is then they, you know, I heard the number was $500 million would have allowed them to cap classroom sizes. I don't know if that's real, but then at the same time, there was $900 million being issued to fossil fuel propaganda. So these are like the scale of the numbers that we're not spending in the ways that we should. You know, propaganda doesn't help produce more barrels. So I would certainly rather see, as a taxpayer, my money going into the education system rather than that. So, you know, I think this is the awakening, and I feel this merging of, as I think you said, and I say it, my husband always says, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. The government has woken the teachers. And I need to say this again, because I like to let people know this isn't just about teachers. What you just described about the government taking away the power of the central table for the, so that's happened with Bill 40 and Bill 13 to professionals, 22 professional organizations, including APEGA, which is the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Alberta, of which I am a part. So in that Bill 40, it explains that they can appoint a government official, like they've done in your case. That a government official, by the way, is the advanced education minister for all 22 of those organizations. That's where the power would lie, which happened under Rajan Sawhney. So, and then the Bill 13 is the Jordan Peterson Act. So the Deregulation Act for us, which essentially has done the same thing to us professionals, which is they've given the government the power to overrule on anything we think is, in our case, public safety and environmental integrity. In your case, it's public education, the Alberta Advantage. So yeah, it's happening to all of us. And I just think that, I do think that there is momentum here, and we have got this, although it doesn't feel that way. And that's the part where I say the agony comes from teachers. So can we talk a little bit about what we ended up with Bill 2? Like, I know that the conditions haven't changed, but can we talk a little bit? And you already talked about them destroying this. Maybe you could get into a little bit. I thought this was interesting in your conversation with Markham, which is the ATA was built from the top down, not from the bottom up. And I'm wondering if you can just expand on that a little bit for me, help people understand how it came to be, maybe, and then we could just talk about. I think there's something important in that.
Yeah, like the ATA, I mean, it's the Alberta Teachers Association. The ATA is not and has never been a part of, like, so it doesn't have union in our name, not part of Gil McGowan's outfit. But we are, of course, a union, right? We negotiate,
Right.
And we negotiate, collective agreements, and we've always been a union. The origin of the ATA, weirdly enough, there's the initial origin, and there was this period of time, and I'm not going to get into all that, but there was a fellow named John Barnett who started the ATA, but some years later, a name might be familiar to people, Bill Aberhart, Bible Bill Aberhart, who was a principal in Calgary Public, lost his job in Calgary Public. And then that loss of that employment led him into politics, and lo and behold, he becomes premier of the province. And as near as we can tell, really, to kind of put a stick in the eye of his former employer, he ended up passing something called the Teaching Profession Act. And the Teaching Profession Act created, or didn't so much create, the ATA was already kind of present, but it made the ATA, it sort of composed legally the ATA, and made it, by this legislation, mandatory. So membership in the ATA is mandatory. So this isn't like most unions are built, if you think of it this way, sort of. Right. Teachers get, people at the work site get unhappy, and they start to organize, and they have a vote, and they form a union on the work site, and eventually they form a larger union, an umbrella union. So they are built ground up. The ATA was top down. So the ATA was kind of in this aspect of it. There's this top-down aspect in terms of automatic membership, all of these aspects. And in fact, one of the things is from the ATA's perspective, the Teaching Profession Act creates the Alberta Teachers Association, and then it's the provincial association that creates the locals.
Right.
And so
it's very corporate. It sounds very corporate. It
is very corporate. And I will say this, I think that model served us very well for a long time. When we were dealing with, I wasn't around for the social credit era, but for the progressive conservatives, I think there was kind of a lot of sort of back and forth and staff talking to staff, and people having each other on speed dial kind of thing, and because you were dealing, say what you will about the progressive conservatives. I mean, I come from a small town called Fairview, and weirdly enough, the home also of Jordan B. Peterson. True story. But anyways, coming from Fairview, we had a beautiful fine arts center that the government paid for. These were people, say what you will, they did care about putting the money and the incredible wealth that was coming out of oil and gas in that Lougheed era did come back to communities. We had and still have really a beautifully made, a really lovely high school and a lovely hospital. That served us very well. This is what we have now is not those conservatives. They just aren't. No. And
there's no progressive. When the progressive name went, words matter, and we are just conserving a certain value. And it's fascinating that you bring Bible Bill into this.
Yes, well,
One of the earlier conversations I had today was about the evangelical Christian movement dominating our political system. And not just our political system, but our whole existence around. Yeah, so it's in politics and it's throughout our society. It's dominating the decision making process. So it's just really fascinating that this has origins. And I think so. I think about the top down nature, and I feel the same. I don't know how the people were necessarily properly represented then when it is designed in that way. Can you speak from your experience? And I know you're not a part of that association anymore or in that position, but can you speak from your experience?
yeah. Well, I'm still obviously a member of the ATA. I just think that the ATA that there just hasn't been. I mean, there's a phrase people use when they talk about. I'm a social teacher, and they'll talk about the strategists, the generals, etc., in charge of coming up with a strategy for a war. They always fight the next war by the tactics and the strategy of the last. And unfortunately, that, like the most famous example of this being World War I, where they just kept charging people over, right? Like it was Napoleonic War. But of course, they're not facing Napoleonic weapons on the other side. They're facing automated weapons. And it was catastrophic. And in a lot of ways, like the most kind of convulsive and horrifying event up to that point. And they didn't even call it, they called it the Great War, the war to end all wars.
This is the only thing. So there were millions of people, like 10 times more than the Second World War, right? Like
the Second World War is even more, right? The Second World War was almost like so there was something in the neighborhood of 22 million people died, about 45 million to 55 million, depending on how you count it, in the Second World War. But the point is, like, that number of people in 4 years was unimaginable before World War I. Right. And so the reason I'm making reference to that is this idea of fighting today's battle with the tactics of the last. I guess in the short version, I would say this, that the Alberta Teachers Association, I think that it's been a very tough lesson for the ATA to learn, for a lot of people in the ATA to learn, is like, these are not the conservatives that we can have these conversations with, because you're not dealing with people, right? You were dealing in the past with fiscal conservatives who wanted to have strong schools, but wanted to have, strong fiscal guardrails and make sure we're not allowing it to get out of control financially. These are people who want to tear it down. They do not have good intentions for public education or for public health care or for the environment. These are people who want to remove measures of accountability for the environment entirely if they can. And so they're Trumpian lunatics is what I would say. And that's what we're dealing with at this point. Mm-hmm. And you cannot deal with those folks with quiet conversations in the hallways of power.
No.
That's not going to work.
No.
The only mechanism that will work with these folks is to mobilize the public. 100%. The only thing they fear is losing an election. Mm-hmm. They don't fear the collapse of healthcare. They're looking forward to it because they want to replace it with private healthcare.
Yeah.
They don't fear the collapse of public education. They would be delighted to have a voucher system in this process. Mm-hmm. We have policy. We know this from UCP policy.
Right.
So that ultimately is the problem that we tried. I think there was one of the issues in our bargaining was that we had this. There were important folks involved in this. I don't want to get into all the specifics of it, but there needs to be a strong pivot by our organization towards, and of course you hear people say this, you see people talk about the grassroots all the time. Well, we need to become a grassroots organization and not partisan. I will say this, I know there's folks who think, well, the ATA ought to join the Alberta Federation of Labor. Well, the Alberta Federation of Labor has a formal relationship with the NDP. And this has always been like a barrier to this because, and I'm a person who believes that we kind of can't join the Alberta Federation of Labor because I, as a teacher, I teach
Right.
everyone's kids.
Yes.
And
You don't have
teach,
a choice.
yeah. But not being partisan isn't the same as not being political.
That's right. Yeah.
We have
Need
to
to be political.
Yeah, we have to be absolutely political. And if these people are doing real harm to kids, we need to call it out and call it out much more forcefully. And we need to leverage the most effective, amplifiers of that message, which is our teachers and our teachers talking to the people in their community, because teachers know a lot of folks. And they have there's a lot of pull. If all the united teachers in the province, and this is a thing, say what you will, there's plenty of teachers who are conservative and longtime conservative voters, but I will tell you, they are not impressed with the actions of this government. And so what ended up happening, to kind of put as quick as I can, a bow on this, when the time came, the government had the opportunity, they had mechanisms that they could have used to try and deal with this in a way that wouldn't have betrayed their animus towards public education. But they decided to stomp basically in the faces of teachers pretty hard by using the notwithstanding clause. They could have gone the other way and gone to a binding arbitration. But at that point, and they've said this publicly, they feared that an arbitrator would give us closer to what we were asking than what they were willing to give.
Right. Yeah.
They forced us into this. So it was never a genuine commitment to bargaining. You always know when you go into bargaining, you know you're not going to get what you asked for initially. But they were simply not willing to actually engage in bargaining because
you got nothing. You got absolutely nothing from it. In fact, they did again this like gaslighty thing where they gave you COVID shots, which is almost like this extra pull to their base, where it's creating this I think a connection between, because they are against vaccination and against so it's almost like this, we gave them their COVID shots. Like that's what you were after, were COVID shots. Do you remember this part of this?
I remember the reaction of teachers in particular, but they, and the fact was, it wasn't even a factor, right? Like,
no, I mean, this is the thing. It's like an insult to injury. We're doing nothing for you and we're pretending this is something we gave you, which is not real. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Was there more you wanted to say there?
No. But that's kind of where it came to, is that I think that they intended for us to lose the support of the public, and they wanted to capitalize on that. I think there was a certain amount, honestly, of them licking their chops. And then I think they were very unpleasantly surprised at how much support teachers had. And I think out of really out of spite, they lashed out at us and put in place, locked this in place, used the notwithstanding clause. And now what they're trying to do, I think they realized they lost a certain amount of, political capital in what occurred with the strike. They're trying to go through some motions with, this cabinet committee that is like, I think we know in advance, they were willing to use the notwithstanding clauses they did to ensure that they didn't have enforceable class size and class conditions in the collective agreement. So whatever is provided out of this, it will be within a set dollar amount. It doesn't matter how dire the needs are.
Yeah.
And they will, much like Minister Nicolaides, what they will do is they will turn it into a public relations and branding exercise. Mr. Nicolaides constantly talking about, 150 new schools have been approved. Well, 17 schools approved in Calgary Public. 1 is actually under construction.
Right.
12 schools approved in Edmonton Public. 1 under construction. 12 approved in Calgary Catholic. 4 under construction. So it's about 14. You can take his 150, and it looks like it's about 14% of that is a reality. And some of them are even just in the early design stage. So there's this element of just sort of pumping smoke in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay. So I want to say, as you mentioned, so you can't be on the inside with this group. There's no negotiating with them. We need to change the structure to a grassroots movement. I feel this coming. A taste of it was from this recall movement. we certainly, just for your information, the group that is in Calgary Bow and the teachers that are sort of a part of this want to start building what does good public education policy and platform look like, from our points of view, so that, like you said, we have that teacher's voice, we have that educators, that people who are concerned about, the curriculum, they actually have a voice. And where I'm trying to take it, if I say my mountaintop goal with it, is to have a citizens assembly around this effort, so that we're actually getting policy built from the ground up. So that's sort of the future vision that I'm working towards this year, and want education to be one of those two things that we're moving forward. So we're going to do like a watershed protection effort and restoration effort, I should say, and then education. So those are the two areas we want to move forward. So anyway, when I think about an action plan for teachers and what things that we want to see, do you have any ideas? I'll use one specifically. I know this doesn't solve much, but it solves some. One of the private schools in Calgary has put Waldorf, I believe, no, maybe. One of them has put out that they don't do the numeracy and literacy testing. They see it as it's not helpful for their students, and it's a burden on teachers. So, and they actually say that it's harmful. They go as far as to say it's harmful. So I'm curious, and again, I'm throwing out ideas here. Is there a collective action too? And I know it's legislated. This is the thing. It would be basically a strike effort again in some form that would have repercussions. But I'm just throwing out there, what are some of the things that you think the teachers can start to either educate the public or activate the public in some ask of government, if that makes sense to you?
It does. Now, I will say this, like one of the things that's a challenge here, and I think it's a challenge, I know I keep referring to healthcare. It's a challenge for us in much the same way it is in healthcare. Like there's all kinds of elements of it where someone inside the healthcare system can see how damaging these decisions are. But anytime, the phrase I know people use in sort of politics, et cetera, is if you're explaining, you're losing. It's hard to explain it. When you make reference to, watersheds, right? There's all kinds of things about climate change, et cetera, that if you're trying to explain it, even though NASA has this amazing site that is unbelievably persuasive, but you have to sit there and digest some pretty complex stuff, right? Even though they do a great job of making it understandable. I guess I'll transition to the parallel being climate change. What I think is going to finally awaken people to climate change is water rationing.
100%.
Is what I believe will, if you can't have a shower for more than 3 minutes, that is the thing that will wake us up. And the glaciers are disappearing. Yeah. We have to focus on what is understandable. So, I mean, I'm pretty active on social media. Since the strike, right? I think that we're in a season right now where we have to look, like these are all shared interests. Teachers have, obviously teachers are very heavily invested in what's going on in schools, and that's front and center for teachers. But I have to say, over the last little while, I spent probably more time talking about healthcare, because like the tragic death of that poor gentleman in the ER, the 44-year-old father who passed away without seeing any help in the ER, and things such as honestly national unity in the face of the threat of Trump and what's going on there. I think what we just have to do, and this is perhaps a diffuse answer to, and I think you're asking trying to bring it to a point, but I think we just have to be relentlessly political and relentless advocates. And if there is a place where we can push, where our collective push actually moves the other side and moves public opinion, then that's where we push.
Yeah.
And we push. I think healthcare is an incredible weakness for these people. I think because they have torn it down, and now I think the public is genuinely awakening to how bad this is.
Yes.
I think separatism, Danielle Smith has put herself in a very difficult spot here, because she's got a party that is, according to polling, 56% separatist in a province that is clear majority not.
I will say 100% separatist unless proven otherwise, which would be to step aside. So I would say, keep going.
Yes, no, 100%. And then, of course, where we get the opportunity, we push. I'm not saying we abandon education, but wherever the weak spot is, because we're dealing with a group of people who have bad intentions, we need to make it. They will not do the right thing
Yeah. Yeah.
out of their own internal motivations. They will do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So we need to either replace these people with
Yes.
a different and better species. There's plenty. I would be delighted to have the conservatives I grew up with in charge of this province right now.
Yeah. 100%.
Delighted.
Yeah.
We need to replace them.
Yes.
And I am not suggesting, and again, to be clear, this is not partisan.
No.
I'm not like I actually have reservations. There's problems I have. I mean, weirdly enough, another person comes from Fairview, Alberta, is Rachel Notley, grew up in Fairview, Alberta.
No kidding. Oh my God. What?
It's true. Yeah.
I have to go to this place. What happened there? My God.
It was in fact, she knew Jordan Peterson, and I met both of those people. And, yes, it's a crazy thing. But the fact of the matter is that these are folks who have to be changed.
Yes.
Like, you cannot appeal to their better natures.
No.
Because there is no better nature to appeal to.
No, so I 100% agree. And I need to say, from experience, from the grassroots effort that I've experienced, this has been the most nonpartisan thing I've done. And I would say that there is a very strong voice for people who voted conservative and are mad. They are against this. Like if you look at the numbers, like we got 6,500 signatures. There were more than 13,000 people who voted for the NDP. So we didn't bring out the NDP in this. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. This is a people, and like you're saying, we have, when I talk about this work, I think about there's kind of two areas. There's the people who are aware and want to actually build the framework of what this solution space looks like. And then there's the general public, and we need them to scrutinize this so that they're at least brought around in it. So there is two different things that have to happen. So I agree with you. We have to simplify it for the general public to be able to activate and push back. And I will say that I've heard from the NDP several times, and I should probably say it in this, I'm not sure if I've said this on the podcast, but the education critic came to an event in Calgary 4 weeks ago, a month ago or more, and said, there's nowhere to put the public dollars back into the public system, and we're not giving you anything before the election, and that, like, you can expect 2 or 3 months before the election. And yeah, so don't expect anything from me in terms of like what we should do. That was her response to a room full of like the ATA was there, Support Our Students was there, Public Interest Alberta was represented there. So these were, some big organizations making some very clear messages of the crisis and what we need, and no response from the NDP. So I think this has to come from teachers. This has to come from educators saying, this is what we need to, where we need to go. And what the NDP has said out loud in that room again is, we need a parade. We will not change direction unless there is a parade telling us to do so. Otherwise, it'll be the same direction as where we're headed. A good example I know from my perspective is the pipeline. To be talking about this as being a real solution for Canada is criminal. And it's a shame that we do not have a party that is willing to say that in this province. So these are real legitimate things that we cannot look at this as a political solution, but rather a public engagement, participatory democracy type solution is what's needed from us.
Yeah. And the fact is, like, I am a person who, I'm not sure if you've ever read, there's a very good author named Rebecca Solnit, who she's pretty active on social media, especially since Trump. She put out a piece a while ago where she talks about politics isn't friendship, it's chess. I'm trying to achieve a goal, and it doesn't matter. I can work with someone. I can have an ally in a lot of important things. That person can be passionate about a pipeline. I'm in Grand Prairie, Alberta. There's plenty of people here who are, to the marrow of their bones, they want more pipelines, right? And they'll say yes to, like if one's good, three's better kind of thing. Like that's kind of the attitude a lot of folks have. I can leave that aside if we can agree that schools need to improve, that our hospitals need to improve, that there has to be some kind of a plan to do
Right.
cleanup of billions of dollars of orphan wells and damages and environmental impacts. There has to be an acknowledgement of, from an environmental perspective, the amount of methane that is just allowed to leak out into the atmosphere. And methane, of course, is a far, far more potent, contributor to climate change.
Yeah.
So all of those aspects, if I can find something that we can hook together our arms on and push, then I'll push. I will push under, as far as that goes, with almost anybody. I'm not saying there's not people who are disqualified. There are certainly folks who I cannot stand next to. But that's kind of where we have to just basically become more strategic, relentless political animals, where it's like, if that's a cause I can actually lend my voice to, I'm happy to do it. And and we can.
It's sorry. I just want to say, I think of the phrase slew foot, like when you trip somebody up and they're not expecting it.
Yeah.
That's what I think we have to do. And like, some of the people I've met in this we need to be witty, and we just need to be clear as to what is silly and wrong about what they're saying and where we need to go. But also, like you said, not to lose the sight of the fact that they are looking to destroy our systems. They don't care about public good in whatever shape or form. They're benefiting from it being destroyed, actually. So we need to look at them as the enemy. Unfortunately, this is not somebody who's working for our best interests, and we have to make sure to get that out there. So I'm hearing teachers need to be vocal. They need to be, and that's the other thing I forgot to say, is door knocking with teachers has been remarkable. Like, this is a volunteer's dream to have teachers talking to people, because like you said, there is no choice. As a teacher, you have to speak to everybody. You don't get to pick and choose. Mm-hmm. So it's structural, it's non-selective, where I think of a lot of people in the environmental movement are used to doing it by choice and not being in conflict with people. Mm-hmm. So there's a game-changing opportunity from a activist perspective to have teachers in the mix, because they don't have the luxury of being, just picking and choosing conversations. They're good at having difficult conversations, let's say. So that's the opportunities I see in people getting involved. So that's, to me, staying engaged in the statements that people are making on behalf of, like you said, social justice and environmental justice and education and healthcare, all the things that are of value to us. You called it about like an activist union, shifting from a top-down union to this activist. And maybe it's just meeting them in between. I'm not sure. But any final words you want to offer for people in terms of what they can do if there's a teacher that's just feeling so frustrated with the day-to-day right now? Any thoughts there before we wrap?
Well, I mean, I think teachers need to obviously take care of themselves. Like it's a grind, it is difficult, especially after everything they gave. But I think teachers, first of all, should be proud of the only way that, I think I said that in the previous conversation, the only way they were able to really put teachers down is by invoking the most powerful and unprecedented powerful invocation of the notwithstanding clause. They had to use Thor's hammer against us because we had won the public.
Right.
We have not lost the public. No. We lost to Thor's hammer, but we have an opportunity. We still have the public's here. And I think understandably teachers have taken a beat. That's fine. Take a beat. But then you have to get up and you have to keep working and you have to look for opportunities. And I think what teachers should be doing is looking at opportunities to get involved in their own local to change some of the direction and I think some things do need to change in our own organization, but they also have to be politically involved. Again, I'm not saying that it can be like as an individual partisan if that's their choice, but we need to push. And as you say, I mean, there's no guarantees that the NDP is going to be, we're not talking about a savior there either. We need to push on politicians writ large, all of them, to move things in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. We are moving in the wrong direction. We need, and you know, let's be honest, we have big dark forces at play. You mentioned the United States and the separatist movement. It's not it's not unrealistic to be a member of the NDP and be fearful of just coming out and saying, no, it's going to be this way. You know, there is major consequences for pushing back against the forces that are moving us in the wrong direction, both here and in the United States and elsewhere. But to me, it's exposing this virus that we have attached to us now, which is not the PC party of old. We need to shake it off by helping people understand. We need to have some fun with it. You do a great job, Peter, of keeping people informed and engaged. You had a video recently talking about the smooth operator nature of them in the way that they say one thing and do another and blame. But yeah, your voice is also very soothing. So anytime you want to come back and update people on where they can take action and where we can make a difference, please know you're welcome back here with me. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, well, that'd be great. Thanks so much, Jenny.
Yeah, have a great rest of your night.